friends. This is your announcer, Cal George. My About Town adventure story tonight concerns a young lady named Penelope. We call her Penny for short, and it just so happens she's my cousin. The whole thing started early this morning with me being late for my broadcast. When a man's late, anything can happen.
You a little late this morning, Cal?
Oh, hello, Penny. Late? I sure am. Say, you're just the one I want to see. A fine outfit you work for.
What's wrong with it? You weren't expecting the bus operator to pull you out of bed.
Look, Penny, it's not funny. I pay good money for bus service, and what do I get? This. I'll bet $2 there won't be another bus for 10 minutes.
All right, cousin, you've got a bet. After you for $2.
Penny likes her job with the transit company, so you can see what I'd let myself in for.
Feel better about the service now?
Call this service? I'm standing, aren't I?
Well, so what? So am I.
Yeah, but you work for the company. I pay good money to ride in these things.
Yes, and get plenty for your money, too.
Oh, that's loyalty. You should be in charge of public relations for the company.
Excuse me, please.
Look, Cal, I'd like to show you a thing or two about this service.
Prove what, for instance?
Well, for one thing, Mr. George, I can prove a bus ride is the best bargain in town.
I'll bet my hat you couldn't.
Cal, since you're in a betting mood, I need a new hat. You've got another bet. By the way, where's my 2-spot? Uh-oh, this is my stop. Oh, forget it, Cal. I was kidding.
No, I'll pay up.
Hey, you're off this afternoon. I'll settle for lunch.
I'd much rather pay.
I'd much rather have lunch with you.
Here, Penny.
Goodbye. See you at noon.
There I was, on the spot. If I stood her up, I'd never live it down. If I took her to lunch, well, I had an idea what was coming.
And, Cal, it's no use your arguing with facts. Records show the public wants 4 things of a transit system. Convenience, comfort, safety, and economy. Got that?
So?
So, the problem is how to give them convenience and comfort and safety and still keep fares reasonable.
So what?
Well, that takes a lot of doing, and that's what I want you to see for yourself. Now, am I going to get a chance to win that hat, or are you going to back down?
Okay, the bet's on. I need a new hat. Saw a dandy Stetson down the street, only $14.
Okay, shall we go?
I hadn't realized how seriously Penny was taking this. Public transit was still only a vague term to me until we reached the street. Then she let me have it. How would I like the job of arranging transit for all these people? Where did they all come from? Where did they all want to go next? She had me. I hadn't the faintest notion and failed to see how anyone could find out. Obviously, this crowd had assembled from points all over the place, some maybe from English Bay, others perhaps from Dunbar. Some of these people from North Vancouver might be on their way to Burnaby or New Westminster or perhaps Chilliwack. No personal affair of mine, but Penny made me see those crowds in the light of a transportation problem. And I had to admit with reluctance that it is one big assignment. In fact, as I found out later, the major problem in public transit all over the world. My curiosity was aroused. How did the BC Electric handle it? Then I learned about checkers. A checker is one of those quiet men who stand at intersections or ride a bus. Their job is to catch a record of the traveling habits of the public. They check loading conditions on the routes, the time, the place, the weather. Weather is a big influence on public movement. From the daily reports of 20 of these men, the company is able to keep a reasonably accurate check on the movements of people who depend on transit service. I began to see the light. Having delivered point number 1, Penny lost no time in a follow-through. We headed for the transportation headquarters at the bus depot. Penny seemed to have no trouble getting attention. Maybe it has something to do with being a good-looking redhead. Anyway, one of the head men of the transit department personally undertook to show us around. In these offices, all the transportation routes and all the bus schedules are worked out for the entire lower mainland system. It's mainly paperwork, though, and I didn't get much of an idea of the routine until we studied a map. Then I was about ready to admit it's a whale of a big job. In the first place, the travel habits of 500,000 people have to be recorded, studied, and analyzed. Then schedules for over 600 vehicles have to be worked out to serve more than 2,300 separate runs in the area and kept flexible enough to meet sudden changes. And finally, shifts for more than 1,600 vehicle operators have to be shuffled into this complicated scheme of things. No wonder they need all the help. The heavy responsibility falls on the shoulders of a group of specialists. Checkers reports, for instance, all clear through this man. After careful checking and analysis, they're turned over to assistants for tabulation. I now understood in part how the company studies the movements of the people who travel. When a final analysis of these movements is tabulated, other specialists use the information to work out vehicle schedules. The big trick here is to route buses to where and when the public will need them. It's pretty complicated because runs all vary in length, anywhere from 2 to 11 miles. The final form of this effort is passed on to operations departments as a running sheet, but beforehand, it's used in working out shifts for 1,600 operators. Runs all vary, times vary, and loads change from day to day. It's a great old chess game. Aside from this day-to-day effort, there are other specialists working on traffic analysis, others on new route plans and conversion problems, still others on loading zones and physical changes. I could see that basic planning here has to be years ahead of present needs. But me, for the simple life, I'd barely absorbed the fundamentals when I began to feel a headache coming on, so we thanked our host and went away. I was grateful to leave this crosswords puzzle to the boys that liked that kind of work. Penny's next expedition was a trip to 41st Avenue. We were heading for the big equipment center at Oakridge. I was all set to relax, but not Penny. She talked right into the subject of the 1,600 men who operate our transit system. Every time there's a schedule change in the system, there has to be a change of working hours for the men who meet the public, your bus operator and mine. The process is called a sign-up and takes place in the Prior Street depot. The boys arrive in the sign-up room by appointment and choose new runs in order of their seniority. It's well organized, only takes a few days to complete, but as Penny said, a tremendous task for the men who prepare the sign-up sheets beforehand, and all quite necessary in a transit system aiming to give the best possible to the public. Incidentally, I learned, too, that the company keeps 20 extra men on duty just to take over in case of sickness or other emergency. She went on to talk about traffic supervision. Because of open bridge spans, fires, unexpected crowds, and 1,000,001 other problems, a large staff of traffic supervisors are needed. You've seen these chaps at intersections downtown. In the outlying districts, they're supplied with cars. When traffic tie-ups occur, they're dispatched to regulate the broken schedules and reroute equipment if necessary. As Penny pointed out, the services of these men, their equipment, as well as the extra men and sign-up clerks, are all a part of the organization to provide transit service. I was beginning now to appreciate the amount of background expense involved in operating a transit system, and at the same time developing a reluctant respect for Penny's views. I'd always thought of her in terms of bobby socks, but my kid cousin was growing up. Oakridge Transit Depot is a tremendous place. 13.5 acres, in fact, hewn out of the bush into a super service depot. Its location was chosen to anticipate the future growth of the city. The layout includes a huge garage, a service station for equipment, modern wash rack, parking space for hundreds of vehicles, and an administration building designed and landscaped to conform with the residential nature of the district. You never saw so much equipment in your life. Penny decided, though, to start our tour with the administration building. On the ground floor, the operator's schedules are handed out each day. Transfers and change wickets keep a staff of 9 on the move. Upstairs, we met the man in charge of all transportation safety and training. He took time out to show us around. We started with a peek at training. In one room, rookie operators were attending their initial lecture. This class training covers safety instruction, fare structures, and all other subjects that can be handled orally in class. But training gets more practical. In the equipment room, we came upon another group studying the action of a electric frog. They have to understand its function to operate a trolley coach. Another group were being instructed in the working of the air brake mechanism. There's a lot of angles to the operation of a $25,000 bus or trolley coach, and a lot of responsibility, too. The more a man learns about the mechanics of his vehicle, the more efficiently he can operate it. A qualifying operator puts in weeks of intensive training. Part of this training is practical driving, done on a special loop. And each operator undergoes a preliminary course before taking the vehicle into traffic for further instruction. Throughout this training, safety is stressed continually. Care of the passenger, avoiding traffic traps, courtesy in dealing with the passenger, and 101 other things which qualify a transit operator to carry passengers quickly and safely. Frankly, I was amazed to find all this going on. In this scheme of things, the effort to avoid accidents is a continuous program. They keep track of every accident that occurs in the service, no matter how trivial. They're all coded and logged. Every street and intersection has its own accident record, and so does every operator. In the case of an operator having recurring accidents, they study his record in an effort to ascertain the cause. If negligence is indicated, a warning from the superintendent may be necessary. In any event, the operator is free at all times to consult the safety men, who try and determine from the pattern of his record just what his basic problem may be. With this detailed system, the answer is usually found before serious accidents occur. This intense interest in safety extends to the general manager and all operational heads. They meet every month, or oftener if necessary, to discuss accident matters and new safety devices. In addition, a monthly safety pamphlet is mailed to the home of every operator, and posters and bulletins are used to keep safety a foremost thought in the minds of all employees. I was not surprised to learn that this safety effort is recognized by the National Safety Council as one of the most extensive and thorough in the business. My bus fare suddenly took on the aspect of a small insurance policy. As we walked toward the garage, I thought how little I actually knew of this big business of public transit. But I was learning fast. On the way, we stopped at the service station. Some of the equipment was moving through, trolley coaches on one side, gas buses on the other. It takes 40 gallons of gas to keep a bus in service all day long, 325 gas buses, 1,300 gallons a day. Up at the wash rack, vehicles were rolling through in an endless stream. Here was a heavy investment in equipment and another day-to-day expense that I'd never thought of. But after all, it does something for the prestige of the city to have smart-looking equipment on the streets. Penny's object from the start had been to show me how operating costs build up. She was doing a fine job. Now she roped in the superintendent to show us around the garage. It's an immense place. Servicemen were busy in the inspection pits. We'd asked for it, so our guide put us through the full treatment. We learned that gas buses get a minor checkup every 1,000 miles, a major check every 4,000. That's about once a month. Trolley coaches are checked every night and given a more thorough examination every 2,000 miles. That's about every 2 weeks. There's no guesswork here. These boys don't have to guess. They have the equipment. Gas engines, for example, can be tuned up to road conditions by watching a dial. This machine, called a dynamometer, imposes a running load upon the motor while the bus remains stationary. A mechanic has no need of driving around looking for a steep hill to test out his job. The hill condition is right there on the garage floor. Efficiency plus, but as Penny piped up, an operating expense nonetheless. And we saw plenty more. For example, the intake contact for trolley coaches. Carbon shoes, which slide on the trolley wire, are used as contacts, replacing the old-time trolley wheel. Under normal conditions, a carbon shoe lasts about a week. In frosty weather, as little as 1 day. This is just another little detail in the day-to-day operation that goes into providing that service the public expects. The shoes cost about 50 cents each, and a few cents more to install. That didn't sound like much. It didn't look like much. But I was shaken by the casual statement that keeping these babies in new shoes mounted to over $10,000 a year. The discussion went from one thing to another and got into winter driving and the subject of chains. During snow weather, every available man in the garage goes to work on chains. A set of chains on a bus lasts about 4 hours under tough conditions, and at best, seldom longer than a week. The company, in the winter of 1948, spent over $10,000 in a single week keeping chains on the fleet. Still another expense in Operation Transit, and a vital contribution to public safety. In another department, we came upon body repairing. The boys on the job told us that this kind of damage ties up an average of 4 vehicles a day. That's an average of $96,000 tied up continuously for body and paint work. We took in the paint shop, too. The painting is mainly done at Kitsilano shops. In the case of excessive repairs, the entire bus is stripped to the metal, windows and trim carefully masked with tape before spraying begins. Then the paint goes on in 4 successive coats, with a rub down between coats as they dry. In painting a bus, they do the inside, too. Vehicle numbers and familiar Thunderbird emblem are applied by Fageol Transit. Pretty sharp, I thought. Destination signs are produced by the silk screen process on special translucent linen. Obviously, this painting is done on an efficient production basis, with very little lost motion. But efficient as the work may be, I was told that each of these vehicle paint jobs costs about $250. With the entire fleet getting a complete repaint every 3 years, that's nearly $70,000 for a shine. Worth it, sure, but wow. I was conceding to Penny's views by now, almost without realizing it, but she kept right on. There was the matter of tires. It takes 3,600 tires to keep the fleet on the road. The average tire costs about $110. On this basis, the cost of keeping the fleet on rubber is about $250,000 a year, $250,000. My little bus fare seemed pretty small indeed. But tires are only one item in the running inventory. In the stock rooms, everything was so neat and orderly, I was amazed by the statement that the inventories of spare parts and assemblies total over $504,000. Big money again. Over $500,000 tied up in bushings and springs, resistors, everything needed to maintain operation, from from lock washers to spare trolley coach motors, just waiting, ready for service. I never cared much for paperwork, but fortunately there are those that do. The mechanical operation of a transit company calls for endless detail in costing, purchasing, records, inventories, and a management staff to keep constantly looking ahead, planning methods of operation, new ways of beating the ever-present problem of costs. In brief, friends, that is what we saw at Oakridge. In no time at all, we were down at Cambie Garage. The superintendent explained that this was where all the automotive repair work takes place. We got in there just in time to see a replacement motor being installed. While we watched, the motor was trucked in and hoisted as a single unit into position, ready for bolting in place. Meanwhile, the old motor, which had been removed, was elsewhere being given thorough cleaning with steam before going into the shops for overhaul. Through the use of this modern handling equipment, a bus may be fitted with a new motor in very short order. But it's not just a matter of equipment. Obviously, the mechanics have to and do know their jobs. It was intriguing to watch 10 tons of bus float slowly to the ground, complete with a new motor, while, at the same time, the old motor was being taken by overhead crane into the shops for repairs, and where, after overhaul, it would stand waiting its turn for service in another bus. With this system, the bus that comes in with engine trouble goes out in a matter of minutes, so the seating capacity is kept available for public service. They have a great system of unit bays at Cambie Garage, where specialists in each line maintain a constant output of repaired assemblies: shock absorbers, carburetors, pumps, compressors, and so on. As the units are completed, they go back into stock, ready for service at short notice. With this system, repairs can be done more efficiently, more carefully, and above all, more economically. We learned that economy is the byword in the machine shop, too. Rather than discard expensive parts because of minor wear, they have some almost fantastic equipment for machining worn parts into serviceable units again. With this equipment, grinding a crankshaft averages $30, where a new one might easily cost $300. And the same thing applies to cylinder grinding. A scored engine block is reclaimed for thousands of hours of service by the same method. Con rods are bored out in an automatic machine. Pistons, too, are turned and fitted to a thousandth of an inch. Warped cylinder heads get a flat new face on a surface grinder, while brake drums are turned down and finished without removing the tire from the wheel. Everything needed for repairs was there, whether for flushing a crankcase or rebuilding an entire power plant. And all this is backed up by a precision laboratory. The motors can be run in and adjustments made for maximum power before the engine ever leaves the floor of the shop. Penny was right. This transit system of ours is a super operation. By this time, I began to feel a vague uneasiness about the price of women's hats, when suddenly... Gee whiz, I've got to make my broadcast. I left Penny in a hectic rush, but convinced all the same that a bus ride is a real bargain. I just got back to the studio in time. Well, friends, that about concludes my adventure story for today. This is your announcer, Cal George, signing off, bidding you all a pleasant good evening.
I still think that's the hat for you.
Yes, I like it. How much is it?
It's a real bargain at $18.
I think I'll take it. Oh, and Would you send the bill to Mr. Cal George, the radio announcer?
Why, certainly.
This is one bargain he won't appreciate.